All right, today we're pulling back the curtain on our digital lives. You know, every single tap, every text, every video call. It turns out there's this hidden world of psychological theories guiding it all. So let's dive right in and decode the science behind your screen time.
Yeah, think about it for a second. Why do we do this? Why is your text to a friend all caps and emojis, but your email to your boss is, well, perfectly polished? It feels like we just know how to do it, right? But it's not random at all. There's a really fascinating science that explains these choices, and that's exactly what we're going to break down.
Okay, so first things first. Before we can even get into how we talk online, we gotta understand why we're even there in the first place. What is it that we're all really looking for when we log on?
Well, a big piece of the puzzle is something called gratifications theory. And this idea, it totally flipped the script on how we used to think about media. See, it argues we aren't just passive sponges soaking up whatever's on the screen. No, we're active users. We deliberately go out and pick the media that's going to satisfy some kind of specific need. So, the big question is, what are those needs? So researchers dug in and they basically found 5 main reasons we go online, and I bet you're going to see yourself in at least a few of these. First up, you've got interpersonal utility. That's just a fancy way of saying, connecting with friends and family. Then there's pastime and entertainment. Who hasn't been lost in a scroll hole, right? After that, information seeking, for when you need a quick answer. And finally, just pure convenience, because sometimes texting is just so much easier than making a call. But here's where it gets really interesting. The same study found a little twist. The people who most heavily use the internet for that interpersonal utility thing, to connect with other people, they also tended to be more anxious in face-to-face situations. So what does that tell us? Well, it suggests that for some of us, the digital world isn't just another option. It's actually a more comfortable, maybe even safer space to connect.
Okay, so we've got a handle on why we're online. But that just brings up the next big question, right? Which tool do you actually pick? When is a quick text the right move, and when do you need to schedule a whole video call? It's all about choosing the right tool for the job.
And the science behind that decision is something called media richness theory. It's a really simple but super powerful idea. Basically, not all communication channels are created equal. Some are rich, they're packed with information, things like your tone of voice, body language, all that stuff. And others are lean, like just plain text. The real trick is matching how rich your medium is to how complex your message is.
And you can see the whole hierarchy laid out right here. At the very top, you've got face-to-face communication. That's the richest you can get. It has every possible cue. A step down from that, you have video and phone calls. And as you keep going down toward email and printed docs, the medium gets leaner and leaner. Email, for example, is asynchronous. That means there's a delay, and you lose all that crucial tone and body language. So what's the big takeaway? Well, you'd never try to sort out a really serious problem over a text message, right? You just know you need to reach for a richer channel.
But here's the thing, right? Just transmitting information clearly, that's only half the battle. What about that feeling of actually being there with someone, that sense of connection? Well, that feeling has a name. It's called social presence.
And you can almost think of technology as constantly trying to climb this ladder of social presence. So video calls, they give us a pretty moderate sense of it. Then you have augmented reality, or AR, which pushes it even further by blending digital stuff into your physical space. But right now, the top of the ladder is virtual reality. VR is all about total immersion, giving you the highest possible sense of actually being there with someone, even if you're thousands of miles apart.
All right, so we've figured out why we're online and which platform to choose. So now we get to the really dynamic part. Once we're on there, how do we actually behave? How do we adapt the way we communicate to the person on the other side of that screen?
Well, this is where communication accommodation theory comes in. And look, it's a bit of a fancy name for something we all do, usually without even thinking about it. We change how we speak to either close the social gap or maybe create a little distance with the person we're talking to.
And this theory really boils down to 2 key moves. The first one is called convergence. That's when you adapt your style to be more like the other person. So if your friend uses a ton of emojis, you'll probably start using them too, right? That's convergence. It builds connection. The flip side is divergence. That's when you intentionally emphasize the differences, a lot of times to assert authority, like using super formal language with a new team member to keep things professional.
Okay, this all makes a lot of sense, but it brings up a huge question, doesn't it? If so much of our communication depends on all those nonverbal cues, body language, tone of voice, how on earth do we build genuine, deep relationships through something as lean as a text message?
The answer, it turns out, is in something called social information processing theory. And what it says is that, yeah, text is slower, but we find these really clever ways to make up for what's missing. We can actually build just as much intimacy as we can face-to-face. So how do we do it? Well, since we can't see body language, we get more interactive. We do things like ask more personal questions to encourage the other person to open up, and we share more about ourselves too. We're actively working to build that rich, detailed picture of the other person, just one message at a time.
All right, for this last section, let's look ahead a little bit. So far, everything we've talked about has been human-to-human communication. But what happens when the thing on the other side of the screen isn't a person at all? What if it's an AI? So to really wrap our heads around this, we need to start with one core idea. Learning is social. We learn best when we interact with someone or something that's a little more capable than we are. Think of a teacher, a mentor, or even a really helpful online community. That guide, whatever it is what helps us level up our skills.
Now, let's take that idea and apply it to AI. For a long time, we've seen AI as just a tool, right? Something we use. But what if it's more than that? What if the AI becomes that more capable peer that helps us learn? What if it becomes a real, genuine conversation partner? This is a pretty radical idea, and it's called posthumanism. It basically asks us to kind of stop seeing humans as the center of the universe. Instead, it suggests we should view humans and AI as this deeply interconnected, co-evolving team. In this way of thinking itself doesn't just happen inside your brain, it's distributed. It's shared between you and your technology. Your brain does part of the work and the AI does the other. And this leads to a really powerful conclusion. Because if thinking is shared, then an AI stops being just a tool, like a calculator or a search engine. It can become what the source material calls a legitimate interlocutor. In other words, a true participant in a conversation, one that's capable of influencing not just what we know, but how we think and even how we feel.
So we'll leave you with this thought. From the simple choice of which emoji to use to the complex dance of building a relationship online, our digital lives are absolutely shaped by these theories. But as technology keeps evolving, those lines are getting blurrier and blurrier, and it forces us to ask a really profound question. When an AI can communicate and adapt and connect just like a human, who or what are we really communicating with?